and you are watching Turn to the Stars. And today is May 26, 2015, and we have a really interesting and special show planned for you today. And as you can see on the bottom of the screen, the topic of the show is Chaga, the basics. And my guest is Jim Glidden from Bethlehem, New Hampshire, and he is here via the speakerphone, and I want to welcome Jim to the show. Welcome to Turn to the Stars, Jim.
Welcome to you, Andrea.
It's great to have you, Jim. Jim is come on the show today to share with you his lifelong experiences and stories with Chaga and his wildlife interactions. And just give you a little history on Jim. He is also a retired employee from a 37-year career working with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Commission. And before we get started, Jim, I thought it would be really great if we could share a little story about how I met Jim last summer. And it was so interesting. Jim reminded me the other day while we were in planning for the show that it was July 8th of 2014. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you remembered the day. And Jim gave me a piece of chaga, which is a mushroom that grows on a birch tree, to try. And he explained to me and my family the medicinal qualities and how to prepare a special tea. My family was away on vacation up in North Conway, and when we returned to our vacation chalet, I followed Jim's direction and I prepared the tea with the chaga. He said to crush it up and boil, bring it to a very slow boil, so to not really hot, but I did that. And I have a cup of it right here to show everyone. And when I tasted it, it was a very bland, but very even taste to it. Really not a lot of flavor, very bland. And so I'm going to fast forward the story a little bit. Come this winter, 2014, 2015, I had my yearly physical with a mammogram, which unveiled a calcification on one of my breasts. And prior to this exam, I was having some weird sensations that wrapped around and seemed to ache in the same area. Anyway, upon the news of the from the mammogram, it really scared me. And knowing, I'm an astrologer, so of course I'm following my astrology closely all the time, doing my best to work with the experiences, influences in my path. Anyway, I knew I had some possible potential of facing some health concerns. And my family talked me into scheduling the recommended biopsy. And in addition to this, I was experiencing also some other problems, such as severe hot flashes due to menopause, constant runny noses, digestive problems, sleeplessness. And just prior to my scheduled biopsy, my husband, who is a hockey official and a personal skills trainer, came home one night from one of his games that he was officiating, and apparently he was sharing what I was going through with the other official, and the other official's name is Norbert, and who I know through my husband to be a man that my husband values his opinion very much. So my husband was telling Norbert about what I was going through, and Norbert said, "Tell her to get some chaga." The saying is, he said to my husband, who's Peter, he said, "Tell her drink a glass of chaga every day and she'll never have cancer." And of course, I called Jim right away, and within a couple of days we drove up to see Jim up in Bethlehem, and that was in January of this year. And I've been drinking chaga every day. biopsy was benign. My runny nose has subsided. My hot flashes are at a minimum, incredibly less than they were. And I no longer have the sensations on the left side of my breasts as I was having. And so I want to just say this at the beginning of the show. Chaga is not a miracle cure, but I can tell you I will continue to drink chaga as my family does every day. We all drink it in my household, and as long as I can get it from Jim. And Jim, I want to bring the show to you now because I wanted to tell that story so everyone understands the medicinal piece of this. And so what I want to ask you is how do you harvest chaga in a healthy and safe way?
I actually go out into the forest. I've been out probably 10 times in the last month. And over the last couple of years, I've never been into a boreal forest where there are birch trees, not found chaga in one form or another. It's incredibly abundant in the New England, more northern area. And I usually take a backpack with 2 little hatchets and maybe a saw. If I'm gathering larger ones or ones that I think are going to be too high to reach, I'll bring a pole saw. And that is the best combination to harvest chaga.
And you know, Jim, we actually have a video of you harvesting some chaga from a birch tree that is on your Facebook page, and I'd like to play that video for everyone so they can see this process. So we're going to go ahead and play that video and be right back.
My name is Jim Glidden, and this is the largest piece of chaga that I found. It's on the yellow birch, and it's a pretty good size, very healthy birch. Can't quite touch my fingers on the other side. This one's over 2 feet in length. The saw blade is 18 inches. And it's been growing here for years. I'm just going to take off enough to take home and make tea for my friends and relatives. There's 2 ways to get the chaga off the tree. One is by using a saw, and the other way is to use hatchets to help loosen it up, and sometimes it pops off. Usually it takes 2 of them to do a good job. The name of this fungus is scientifically Anotis obliquus, but the common name chaga, spelled C-H-A-G-A, was actually, it's a name that originated over in Russia or Siberia, and it's been used for generations up there as a tea and a coffee. Sometimes you can saw off a piece. I'm going to try to get it to drop off by going around the thing. If you get a close-up right here, you can see it grows right out of the bark, and it actually pushes some of the bark of this yellow birch tree out. And it also has moss that will grow on it, but it's just on the surface. And you can see where the bark was split right here. I'm going to keep going all around it by trying to pop it off. Stop it.
So, Jim, that's quite a video there of the process that you go through to harvest the chaga. And I'm sure our guests are saying, what is chaga? Why is it so important for good health and well-being?
Chaga is basically just a wood rot fungus, and it's also called a polypore. And many of the ones that rot down the trees and recycle it into the forest, the polypores, they They can also be used to carry fire, like the native people thousands of years ago used to use. Matter of fact, one of the birch tree funguses that was found on a gentleman that they named Uzzi in the northern Italian and Austrian Alps, at an elevation of over 10,000 feet. He was thawing out from the glacier in the 1990s. He's now in a museum in Italy, and he had some of the fire starters and also another birch tree fungus that many people are now discovering that he probably knew about the medicinal properties and was definitely using it to carry fire around. It was talked about being chaga, but I understand they did DNA studies on the 2 mushrooms that he had in his pouch, preserved in his right next to his mummified body, and they estimated his lifespan was 5,300 years ago when he died.
Wow, wow. An ancient human being.
I also posted, if anybody's interested, on my Facebook, Jim Glidden, today, 22 pictures of the chaga fungus. The chaga part is actually just an extension of the mycelium. The fruiting body, which is usually the mushroom, is something after the tree dies, and I posted some of those pictures. The spore-producing parts are like a crusty thing on the bark.
Yes.
Or on the inner bark, or right up against the old wood. And that's what the spores are formed from. When the spores are exposed, they send spores into the air, and wherever there's a broken branch or some kind of injury on the birch trees, it also grows on hop hornburn, beam trees, and maple trees. Those spores will go into the injured area. Then the mycelium that hatches out, the roots basically, go into the heartwood. And then once they've infected the inside of the tree, the infected trees will send the mycelium back out, and there's a mass of it called a canker on the outside, and that's the black part that is actually the chaga.
Okay, so that's the part we were seeing you harvesting from the birch tree.
Yes, and by taking the black part off, you don't really kill the fungus because it's inside the heartwood. Once the tree has died, and they usually die eventually from the infestation, they very often break off partway up on the tree because the fungus will go in and rot the area into the middle. But on this particular tree that the video was made from, that tree is probably well over 100 years old.
Wow, a lot of wisdom in that tree.
It seems to be a type of disease or a fungal problem that will eventually kill the tree, but it seems like the trees can last for years with the infestation.
Wow. Well, can you talk about some of the medicinal qualities of chaga?
The chaga mushroom, the medicinal qualities for modern humans basically was from over in Russia. There was a doctor who went to Moscow, got his certification for being a doctor in 1908. He actually used to have a number of peasants from the outlying areas that would come to him, and that was when cancer was being talked about quite a bit. He couldn't figure out why these peasants didn't have any cancer. So he went out and he discovered the only difference he could see was that they were boiling tea or adding this chaga fungus to their cooking. And he did a lot of experiments, but he had to kind of do it in secret. It wasn't until 1955 that he actually received a patent on his new discovery, and it's an official cancer medication in Russia. But over in the West, it was long known as one of the fire carriers. They never used to have Bic lighters would actually take coals from the fire, place it on the chaga or the other polypores. The fire would go inside the pores, and you could carry it long distances, break open the fungus, and start a new fire wherever you went. The big thing with the West being exposed to the chaga mushroom or the fungus was from a person named Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He ended up being exiled from Russia after the Stalin administration. He was living in Vermont for a number of years. He actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and part of his writing was called his years at the Cancer Ward. And it was the doctor who actually was experimenting with it that he credits to saving his life from cancer that he had very bad.
I remember you telling me that story, Jim. It's a fascinating story. And I just want to let everyone know who's watching the show today, Jim, that we are having a psychic and holistic fair this Saturday at the Yard. It is our 29th holistic fair. And we actually have a flyer of that we're going to put on the screen. There it is. And Jim is going to be with us at the fair. He is one of our holistic vendors. And we are so pleased that you're going to come, Jim. And Jim has told me that he's going to bring lots of dried and fresh pieces of chaga, also some ground up, very fine chaga for tea making, and other pieces of mushrooms to show that will help you with identifying chaga when you are perhaps out on a walk, what the difference might be. So Jim is, as you can tell by his presence on the show today, he's very interesting and very knowledgeable about chaga. You've been doing this searching into chaga your whole life, is that right, Jim?
Yes, I've been experimenting with the wild foods since I was in grade school. Matter of fact, I found out that some of the books that describe some of the berries as being poisonous, they don't kill you.
Oh.
They're just the evolution of plants in their way of spreading the seeds. If you get diarrhea from certain blueberries, that doesn't mean you're going to be dead.
Right.
It just means those seeds, when the birds and the other animals eat them, will be spreading them over in new areas.
Yeah, I saw that last summer with a mourning dove that I saved. And so nature is absolutely beautiful, the natural process of life. And I think that what our guests really want to know, and what I want to know, is what is the cancer part of chaga? Can you tell us about that?
There's many different compounds, but there's polysaccharides, beta-glucans, and other chemicals inside the chaga. It's being studied tremendously now. I understand the pharmaceuticals have been trying to grow it on artificial medium, but it seems to be it gets some of the betulinic acid from the birch tree and the birch bark. And the experiments online that you can discover are tremendous. Some of the biggest benefits I've seen is from giving our pets or our farm animals the chaga tea to drink when they have signs of some kind of sickness.
Yeah, we actually, Jim, we took your advice. We had a sick bunny rabbit and we had a sick guinea pig, and both of them are doing, I would say 75%. The bunny rabbit, she's absolutely completely healthy, and the guinea pig is coming back to health very quickly. So we use it for our pets.
It seems like the different chemicals in the chaga mushroom or fungus actually seems to work with our immune system, and it's very interesting to go in and study the new experiments and the new discoveries. It looks like it's not the only mushroom that has some of the same ingredients, Matter of fact, there's one that's been written about for over 4,600 years in the ancient Chinese medicinal writings. The Chaga mushroom, I haven't been able to find in their writing or described, but there are other ones that are used to be only given to royalty because they were so important to health benefits, anti-cancer. It's in its earliest stages. Many of the names, the scientific name for Chaga, Rhinotis obliquus, has been changed at least 7 or 8 times according to Wikipedia and the research. They're finding out by DNA and advanced medicinal procedures, they're finding out some of the mushrooms that they thought they knew by what they looked like. The different life stages really makes a huge difference. When we're just starting to discover a lot of the things about mushrooms, and the Chaga tea actually works wonderful in your house plants or in your garden as a fertilizer. Some of the benefits of funguses growing in our forest seems to be between their interaction of tree and other plant roots and the mycelium from the mushrooms. They seem to work together.
Well, you know, Jim, do you know what I did? The powder that I ground up, the chaga that I got from you back in January, and you can actually cook it a couple times. You know, based on your direction, I did that, and I kept the leftover chaga, that falls to the bottom once it steeps and cools, and I put it out in my flower gardens, and my flowers are just growing like very, very healthy. So, I mean, you can certainly, I don't know why I did that. I just felt like, you know what, if it's helping me, there must be some other good things in it for my plants. So, I wanted to mention that.
That seems to be one of the big benefits. Matter of fact, there's different experts in mycology, the study of the fungus, that are using some of their experiments to clean up even oil spills. It seems like some of the funguses can actually digest and grow on the toxic materials that we have out there. It seems to be that mushrooms are more closely related to animals than they are plants, which was kind of a surprise when I was researching.
Wow, that is interesting. I would have never thought that. Well, Jim, we are getting sort of close to the end of this show. I wish we could go on and on and on because I love listening to all the scientific information and all the health benefits. And for everyone who's watching the show, Jim's contact information, if you want more information just by watching the show, is natureman113@yahoo.com. And Jim is up in Bethlehem, New Hampshire. And I do want to say, Jim, that I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today. And I want to say a huge thank you and toast chaga to you. I've got a glass. I make it with maple syrup and cinnamon, and my whole family loves it. I have a glass or two every single day. And, it's a very unique, special, and wonderful thing. We're so lucky that we have you to come here and share this information with everyone, and I hope everybody will pass this information on. And just recently, I want to share with you something that I learned from my daughter's Latin teacher, and it goes this way. It is cura ut valias, and it means may you be well. And so I want to say that to you, Jim, and I want to say a great big thank you for being on the show today. And I also want to say thank you to Manchester Public Television for providing us this opportunity to reach so many people, and to my new producer, Masheri Chappelle, who's really been a great support in moving Turn to the Stars forward. And Jim, thanks again for being on Turn to the Stars. Until next week, everyone, take good care, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the fair, and see you next week.